Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Influencer Confidential. I am so excited for today's guest. This is Kate Terentieva. I met Kate on TikTok, I would say, and Kate is all things personal branding. And as the community that I speak to, influencers and creators, I realize that sometimes we just got to go back to the beginning and dive into personal branding. And that's why I wanted to interview Kate and learn from her so she could give us some really good advice and pieces of information so that we can all build our personal brands together. Kate founded MOB MGMT, the personal branding strategy firm for entrepreneurial people of influence. With a background in advertising, Kate devoted a career to humanizing brands like Meta, Savannah Miller Bridal, Lobos 1707, and streetwear giant GRAILED. Marrying her love for branding and people, Kate now uses her expertise to turn influential people into influential brands by helping them craft the story they want to share online and how to build an empire around themselves, whether it's writing a book, launching a podcast, founding a brand, and so much more. I can't wait to dive in and share with you guys this amazing conversation that we had. So let's jump in. Hi, Kate. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you today and chat and learn all things personal branding. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Nina. I'm really excited to be here and finally, meet you face to face. I know we connected on TikTok, and so it's cool to meet people from social media. Not in person, but semi.
Yeah, kind of. I agree. I feel like it gets so lonely, and one of the things I tell all the creators in my community is network, meet people. You never know where people's careers go and connections and vibes, and then you're like, oh wait, I have a kid and you have a kid and we're vibey. Oh, let's, you don't know where things happen. So I love that we were able to take that digital online thing and bring it onto the podcast, and then who knows, maybe one day in real life. So I think what I'd love to chat with you about is this concept of personal branding. I think there's a lot of mystere around it, or mystical, oh, what is that? Can I develop a personal brand? Who am I? So I think it would be great if we just kind of jumped in. Maybe you could start by sharing with us a little bit about what is personal branding. Is this something that any creator, and just to kind of give you a heads up, the people listening in are influencers and creators. Some brands try to sneak in and get in on the convo, but I really like to talk to the creators in the room. So just kick us off with a little bit of information about personal branding, why it's important, and what is personal branding, right?
Yeah, like you said, there is a lot of mystery around it. There's a lot of room for misconception. And I think what we usually see on the internet is either this really scary thing of what personal branding. I think that's for famous people. That's not for me. I'm just starting out. Or we see parts of personal branding that is true, but it's not necessarily the most essential part. So in layman's terms, personal branding is really your emotional appeal. It's your unique selling point, but as a human being, right? So it is no different from how companies separate themselves. It's no different from how Coca-Cola brands itself from Pepsi, or Netflix from Hulu, or how we all recognize Amazon as a company. So translated, you'll see the same thing in some of your favorite celebrities and influencers, like Paris Hilton, Kevin Hart, Emma Chamberlain. They're all known for something, even if you don't really know who they are, because most of us have not had the pleasure of meeting them in person. We do feel like we know them. And a lot of that has to do with the strategic concept of personal branding. And so it essentially is, what are your values? What is your mission? What do you stand for? And the other part of it is who are you for? Who is your target audience? Who are you trying to talk to? How are you trying to position yourself to relate to that person, or be aspirational to that person, or inspirational to them? So that's kind of how we see also in media these terms of girl boss and the internet big sis and your work bestie. Those kinds of terms come out from, this is how I want to position myself to a specific audience who needs this kind of person in their life. So yeah, it's definitely, I would say in a nutshell, it's your unique selling point and how you stand out as a creator and influencer from thousands of other people doing possibly the exact same thing.
Yeah, you're bringing me back to my MBA days of, all of this. And I think it's important because what you're really doing is you are taking the strategies of what big corporate companies are doing. You talked about mission statement, values, positioning, your unique selling prop, right? These are all like big brands. They're sitting down at the round table and they're discussing what is the vision of our company. Like we are doing those exercises too, not only short-term vision, long-term vision, 10-year plans, 90-day plans, and really thinking about ourselves, not just plans like financial goals, but who do we want to be in this space? And I think I love that you're actually taking the groundwork and kind of telling creators, hopefully listening in, yes, growth is important. Yes, all these hacks are important, but you really have to start at ground zero and understand your personal brand, your imprint, your mission statement, all of these tactics. It's important homework. It's like work to do.
It's therapy, literally, for like your brand, so to say.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you hear inner child work, like shadow work, like do all the work. And it's actually that, but for your brand,
No, quite literally. And it's interesting too, because like you said, you need goals just like any other company, right? Yeah, you have financial goals and how you want to make money, but like what's the purpose? Like what is that bigger reason that you are an influencer? I think influencers typically forget that influence is not about you. You don't go out into the world and influence yourself, right? Like that's even laughable to say. You go out into the world to impact other people's lives. And so that's how it should feel when your target audience comes onto your page. They need to feel like, oh yeah, like this person gets me, like they see me, they understand me, they know who I am, and I can relate to their content, or I can use their content to be a better person or learn more or whatever. But most of the time what we do see is that an influencer will start posting trends because that's what's popular, or people will start doing, you'll come on somebody's page and it's just a bunch of get ready with me's and like make food with me. And it's like, that's wonderful. But so far I don't give a about you. So you need to give me a reason to care. And then I'll become invested into the get ready with me and like make a meal with me type of stuff.
Activity.
So
like that
exactly.
stuff, it's like the chicken or egg, right? So it's like, maybe instead of starting there, and you're touching on something that I know my students are probably like ding, 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 the no like trust factor, being known for something, being relatable, likable, having people feel connected to you through your authentic appeal, and then ultimately trusting you, and then being like, I'd love to see your get ready with me. I'd love to see all those like kind of, I guess, trend worthy or typical things that we see on social. You mentioned briefly the why, and maybe that's something that we can also talk about. I'd like to, maybe this is someone's first time ever hearing that you should know your whys. So I'd love to pause on that. And I'd also love to pause like right after, not to set you up too much, what happens if your why changes? And I get that a lot because I'll be with creators all the time that are like, I want, and focusing on, why, deep down, not the why, oh, I want to be famous, but like, here's the imprint or impact I want to do, right?
Right.
So what happens when your why changes? Is your why attached to your niche? Can your why change? Like, I'd love to like explore that secondly, and we can share thoughts on it because I have thoughts too. But first off, what is the why? Maybe someone's never even heard why you need to even like reflect on your why.
Yeah. So if you think of it because I'm also in advertising and like worked on the brand side of things. So I think of people as brands. So like when you think of something like Amazon, whether you love them or hate them, they started out as a business that wanted to make, books and resources more accessible and available to people and save their time, right? That was the bigger purpose. It is a company now, a logistics company that like easily delivers a bunch of things to you, but the bigger why there is convenience, saving time, making a bunch of different products more accessible to you, whether that's literally available or budget wise, right? So with people, it's the same thing. It's a bigger purpose. Like, what do you want to be known for? For me personally, I do tie it into the niche because that could be that you want to be known for being, the person or the point person within like the mid-size fashion realm, because let's say you didn't see somebody like you in the marketing. So instead of just sitting there patiently waiting for someone like you to come around, you wanted to be that person that then brands can hire and put in their own advertisements, but you also wanted to be more relatable than like corporate advertising. I'm literally describing a client of mine right now. So if it sounds specific, it's because it's a real person. But that's an example. Like, you know,
Yes.
usually your why starts from who did I need when I was younger? Or, you know, who did I need when I was less experienced or less knowledgeable about certain things? That's kind of where people usually start that thought process. And then they're like, oh, I have knowledge about this thing and I can help other people learn more about it. Or, you know, I look a certain way and I don't see myself represented, so I want to be that person. We see that in an influencer example. It's Jackie Aina. She started out as one of the first Black women in the beauty guru world, beauty realm, and she is a makeup artist, and she didn't really see any representation. And so she started doing makeup and it kind of gained traction, and she's now one of like the Black women in the makeup community. And so for her, representation was really important. But in terms of changing your why, those things can evolve. You know, I tell people that if brands were to rebrand themselves every 5 years, that'd be a little weird, right? But humans evolve a lot faster than a traditional brand. Your goals may change a month from now. You may not want to write the book that you wanted to write for 15 years.
Yeah.
Or you know, are maybe interested in a different side of the fashion industry than you initially thought you were. And that's completely okay. But I think having a bigger reason in general for why it is that you want to be influential, because I don't necessarily want to use the word famous, is important. And that starts with the person that you're trying to help or influence or be aspirational to, or whatever, you know, it is.
Do you think the best cases are when you are, like, you mentioned the story of like being who you needed 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Do you think you're the best person, like when you're thinking about your audience and target audience, or do you think that it's a good place to start, like to lead or, you know, to inspire or, you know, influence, so to speak, who you were 5 years ago, or who, you know, like start there as a starting point as to who you want to bring value to, right? Like I had a call the other day similarly with a client, and she was like feeling a lot of pressure. She's in the travel space. And I started to learn more and more about her. And she was like, oh yeah, like I got my first passport. Like I got my passport at 20. Like you know, I didn't even start traveling. I'm like, well, why aren't you talking to that girl? You know,
Right.
instead of trying to go with the Joneses and be like, you know, in a so would you co-sign that it's, you know, maybe targeting or speaking to or adding value to who you needed, like start there as an audience? Because sometimes people get lost with like, well, who is my target audience? Like, I don't even know.
Right, exactly. I would 100% recommend that. And I think it's a lot easier for personal brands to do that. If you're somebody who's like more entrepreneurial and you have like a better pulse on target audiences and you're just really good at that stuff, it might be easier for you to establish a target audience that isn't related to somebody that like you needed when you were younger. You can just help somebody with the knowledge and expertise that you have from a professional field or whatever. But yeah, I would say the average like person of influence, that's usually where they start. I mean, if you look at Paris Hilton, you look at Kim Kardashian, it's all the same kind of like, I needed this person when I was younger. And so that's kind of who I like grew into, but then I also am helping that same person or serving them in whatever form. With Paris Hilton, it's, you know, like childhood trauma and being abused in a boarding school. And I'm sure there are tons of women who can relate to that same sentiment. And so for her to be able to be that figure for them is important, but also stepping out of her own shell behind which she was kind of hiding. And so that becomes even more like relatable than just the like the heiress or the like, you know, Valley rich girl type of vibe that she has been known for so long.
Definitely. So now we've talked, you know, a big chunk about branding. To pivot into social, I think so many of us have like maybe a little bit love-hate with social media because of this is the tool that we need to showcase our personal brands on, but then we also get tired or overwhelmed. Maybe there's the imposter syndrome that kicks in, or the comparison game where this person's doing better and then it crushes you. I think consistency and steady course, these are all things that we hear, but they're hard, right? But we need social, we need the TikToks, we need the Instagrams, we need all the platforms. But what I'm curious about is, in terms of social media and developing your presence online, your personal brand online, a few thoughts or questions that I'd like to kind of flesh out. Would you say that should, do we have to show everything? Like, can we be, I think sometimes creators get lost in this, especially when their personal brand is about them. They feel this urge or sense of urgency to show it all. Can we choose what we show? What are your thoughts on that? Is it like lack of authenticity? If you don't, let them in. Like, I know some creators don't want to show their kids, like me, for example. I don't show parts of my life. Like, you only see Nina as the influencer, marketing expert. You don't see me and my husband, or me and my kids, or my miscarriages, or things that may have happened behind the scenes. You're just seeing forward facing, business. What are your thoughts on social authenticity, protect, and your personal brand? Like, how do we kind of manage that? It's a little confusing.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll answer it like this. I've had the pleasure working with some influential people, and usually when you ask them, like, what is it that you want now that maybe you had when you weren't like publicly scrutinized, and they always say privacy. Like, I don't want people to access my life. And my follow-up question is always like, is there something you could have done earlier to prevent that? And normally, before I even answer that myself, they're like, oh yeah, could have set better boundaries. I just felt like I needed to share everything. And for me personally, a really great example of this is, I don't know if you've seen the Manti Te'o documentary on Netflix. He was like an American all-star football player who was dating someone online, and then it turned out to be a catfish. And too late, because he had already told the media that he was dating a woman online who happened to die the same morning as his grandmother, and the same morning of a huge game that he was playing. So he dedicated the game to his dead catfish girlfriend that he didn't know was a catfish, and his grandmother, and announced it to the media. And it made him it elevated his personal brand. It made him this very like wholesome man, this very likable figure, this broken, beautiful person that the media really loves. And then it all came crashing down when it was revealed that, in fact, the person was a catfish, and he had no idea. And it just ended up crashing and burning. It affected his draft pickings. It affected his career. It just affected his mental health in general. Silver lining, he ended up now pivoting and being like an advocate for, people that get tormented online through catfishing relationships, kind of like Neve Schulman. But, he had to go through a huge transformation. Chris Brown is another great example of that, who has tarnished his personal brand forever because his domestic abuse incident with Rihanna became a public headline because everybody knew that they were dating. So I would say establish boundaries. You don't need to be sharing everything. Ditch the lifestyle niche. It's got to go. Ditch the I
love this, by the way. I'm like, so about, because I
was geeking out over here, but it's just you need to establish boundaries. Especially, I don't want to use the word famous, but some of us have the desire to be influential in our space and to help people on a bigger scale. And you need to be incredibly strategic and understand that, like, if you have children, you don't want like creepy people to have access to that. Then hide your kids, hide your wife type of vibe. Or if I have a client who is in a relationship and wants to keep that kind of private and to herself and something that she and her husband enjoy. And a TV network came to them, and they're both in the same industry. So it's giving very much like Chip and Joanna Gaines of their industry. And so a TV network came to them and was like, we would love to do a biopic on you guys. This is so cool. A couple dominating the same field. And she, you know, we talked about this and she's like, I don't really want my relationship out there. I don't want people to have access to that. And I was like, okay, well, that means then that opportunity needs to be turned down. Even though it seems really lucrative, it means that people now have access to something that you want to keep private. So it's
like being able to say no too, like not only setting boundaries, but also following through on them, like being able to say no to money or no to an opportunity, especially if it may seem like a shiny coin, but in fact it goes against your values or something that you may have done in the beginning. Yeah. So
setting boundaries is super important. It allows you to be more selective with the kinds of opportunities that you accept, not just brand deals, but you know, I encourage creators to think bigger. So like book deals, reality TV appearings, that kind of stuff. It's really important to set boundaries early on and figure out the things that you don't want to share online, and really, like you said, sticking to it and being like, if I don't want people to have access to my kids, they're not gonna have access to my kids. I don't want people to have access to my love life, like Mariana Hewitt, who is a lifestyle beauty influencer, co-founder of Summer Fridays. Years ago, people were like, are you single? Are you in a relationship? And she like went on her stories and like, this is the only time I'm going to be addressing this, but I'm not discussing my love life here. You guys can have access to my beauty, my, you know, fashion sense, the other things that I'm building, my friends, my family, but my love life remains private. And so I really kind of respected her for setting that boundary very publicly early on.
Wow, I love that. I have like all the vibes. Yeah, it's awesome.
So that's something that you can do too.
Yeah, being clear about it as well. Being clear about that. One thing that I think is important that we have to talk about this because we're talking about building your personal brand and taking things personally. So one of the things that we often try to tell the creators in our community is to create a little bit of space between them and their content. You know, I'm like, try to create like a little bit of space. Like I always say, like a like does not have it's not tied to a moral value. It's not good or bad, right? It just is. But when it's you, it is freaking hard. Like I know for me, my business is my baby. It's like super personal. As much as I try to coach and say, don't take it personally, like it is hard to not take it personally, especially luckily I have Sidewalker Daily and that kind of gives me a space. Like it's not ninasdata.com, right? I'm not this empire. I have an agency, I have a company, and I get to be like, you know, the figurehead or forward facing, but it's not me that we're going after. But for so many creators, it's them. It's their names, it's their first, last name, their personal brands, they're putting themselves out there. So when they get attacked or like there's two things. One, attacked by trolls and keyboard warriors, it hurts more because it's attacking them versus like someone says Sidewalker's dumb. I'm like, whatever. Like, you know, it's not like Nina is this, right? In terms of like the effect it could have on your mental health, building out your personal brand, because we all know there's like haters. So talking about when you build your personal brand, how do you not personalize things when you're building your personal brand from those people? And also if the content flops, right? Like if you did this video and you're so pumped and you did a reel and you're so excited, and you're like, this would be amazing. And you post it and it's like Cricketville. And you're like, oh my God, do people not like me? Like, is it me, right? This is SarahJones.com. Like Sarah Jones is putting herself on, I'm making this name up, putting herself on the limelight in the arena, and maybe content doesn't do well or someone is like negative. How do we, because this is a therapy session after all, how do we kind of protect ourselves while building our personal brands when being so public?
It's a really great question. This is the way I encourage people to think of it. If it weren't for social media, like, would you still have people talking badly about you? Like in real life, do you have haters? Do you have people talking about you? Most of the time the answer is, well, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Right. Because most of it happens behind your back. With social media, it just kind of exposes all the things and all the conversations that are pretty much still mostly happening behind your back. But now it's like on social media, you can scroll through it and you can see it. And, you know, most of the time when people are being negative towards you, it actually has nothing to do with you at all. We as people are very selfish beings. Everything is about us. It's our world. It's our lives. That's why we see a narcissistic model in the influencer world as well. And so when usually somebody is being negative to you, it is because they're projecting their own feelings about themselves on you. And for me, if I have to be your projector for all of your insecurities just so you can get them out, good, because I helped you. That means I helped you in some way and I served you, and like, God bless, you know? So I wouldn't take it personally because it's not personal. That's hard to do. It takes some like therapy or introspective work or somebody, an influencer friend or someone to talk to about these things who understands. But eventually you get to a point where you're like, listen, me as an influencer, I am showing only a snippet of my life. And that's the snippet that people are critiquing. And if they're critiquing it, they're not my target audience, most likely.
Totally. I love the Brene Brown quote. I think it's inspired by Roosevelt. I'm not sure fully, so I will be misquoting this, but something about like, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked, like, I don't want your feedback, right? Like, if you're not, like, I saw this the other day, and it was from someone that I know, like, posting a trolly type of comment. And I'm like, yeah, you do nothing. Like, you're not in the arena. You're not even trying. Like, so your feedback doesn't count. Like, not to say that maybe someone else is figuring out how to protect yourself totally, but I love that. That really stuck with me, because I was like, people who build their personal brands publicly and online, they're getting in the arena, like they're trying, versus someone who can be from the sideline isn't even trying,
Right.
So.
And it's not about people pleasing, because you will not please everyone. I think one of the first thoughts is like, oh my gosh, if people are hating, I need to like not do stuff, or I need to pacify them, I need to mitigate the situation. But you have haters in real life. That is a thing that you deal with, and most influencers or people who have a personal brand have come on the internet as an escape, because in real life they experience bullying or torment or something from human beings. And so usually it's about, understanding that this is a stage that you're stepping on, and the social people that are watching you, they are an audience that is engaged. If they are not engaged with you, just like in a show, in a concert, you can get up out of your seat and you can leave. You have that power.
Why don't they? It's so annoying. The weirdos that stick around. It's like they're psycho obsessed. I think influencers get it bad because, they're just, again, they're in the arena, they're on the stage, they're doing their thing.
But then at the same time, for tough love reasons, I will also say, because I don't like being the yes man to any of my clients, is to say, are you doing something that isn't serving people? Are you actively offending people? If the answer is no, then you have nothing to worry about. Are you, not really considering your audience? And look at the feedback that you're getting. Is it mean comments about you're ugly and you're stupid? Okay, those, bye. You know what I'm saying? Like, go back to third grade and maybe do it over. But if it's stuff like, oh, I don't relate to that, or I don't understand this, or this isn't, helping me. If it's comments of that kind of realm, then I would say there's a gap in your personal brand. Either people aren't getting it, people aren't resonating with it, or you're positioning yourself in a way where the audience that you're looking to attract doesn't understand you. So from that standpoint, there's definitely something to figure out. And that's just like in a business too. Sometimes you release a product or you launch a brand and like people are like, I don't get it.
And you grow, like you'll launch a product, you're like, oh wait, like I don't want this anymore. It doesn't serve me. It's not good. Like, being able to be nimble. That's why we have our own brands. Right. Also to be able to be fast moving and not get stuck through paperwork and red tape to be like, we need to change. No, it's like you can move fast on your feet when you are your own, person. Exactly. Publicly. I actually saved this, like, I don't know, a meme graphic yesterday. It was inspired by Tinks, and it says, stop asking yourself, do they like me? Start asking, do I like them? And I thought that was just like, too, it's like, if you are kind of in this headspace as a creator, building your own personal brand and so worried about what others think of you, like ask yourself, do you even do you even like them? It just kind of sets it straight. I think it's important to have those like guiding lights as you are putting yourself out there, because it is risky.
And it only gets worse. Like if you think now it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a couple mean comments here and there. Somebody's calling me ugly. Somebody's calling me dumb. Like it gets way worse. Like imagine, headline after headline after headline. You look at somebody like Kim Kardashian. I mean, it feels like 50% of people hate her and 50% people love her. Either way, they're still people.
Yeah, I don't know how they deal.
So, it only gets worse, but just understanding that like this is not a personal attack. Like in the advertising industry, we say, like it's not personal. You're not married to this like idea that people are critiquing, or you're not like you said, people always evolve. And also if you set boundaries, people don't know everything about you. You're curating what they see online. You're only telling them what they have access to. And if they have thoughts about that, that's human nature. Thanks for your thought. Thanks for your insight, and moving on.
Okay. I have a tough question for you. Are you ready? It's scary. It's scary because when people ask me, I'm always like, why do you ask me this? So I'm going to do it and ask you. Okay. Because you are the professional here that helps people build their own personal brands. Okay. This is your sauce. We live in a very polarized world, right? Yeah. Where there is conflict and so much happening. And I'm sure you see it too, whether there be an uprising or a political movement. I have creators all the time that will come to me during these movements, right? Or doing something like right now in Iran, the women are protesting against their hijabs, or in this part of the world, there's a hurricane and then there's this like, so I know sometimes creators will freeze, like, what do I promote or what do I not promote? Is silence being complicit? Am I being, how do I get involved? Is it performative? Like I've gotten so many creators tell me that, like if I post something like a black square or circle or something that's happening now, am I being performative? It's tricky to tie your personal brand to movements. And there's people on the one side that's like, stay in your lane, you don't need to be talking about this. And then there's people on the other side that's like, use your influence to make change, like use it to drive the needle and like make this world a better place. Like don't sit back, don't talk. And there's no right or wrong answer, which is for you, just so you know, there's no right or wrong, right? It's like schools of thought and how you want to navigate these waters. But I do think that personal brands, influencers and creators that put themselves out there publicly face this every quarter. Something happens and they struggle with knowing how to show support, forward facing. Do they just not? So what is some coaching or advice that you've said to your clients in the past, or when they come to you and they're like, what do I do? Like, whether it be Roe v. Wade or a big, protest that's going on global. How do we navigate these waters? Because we didn't have to do that before. Like before, 10 years ago when social started, people didn't post about like which side they're on, right? Or that just didn't happen. And in real life, it didn't happen either. Like nobody knew, like if you were a Republican or a Democrat, or if you're left or right, or if you're this or that, no one knew the person. But now online, it's like you have to say what side you're on, or I don't know. So I know this is scary. It's more of a conversation, not like a question, but what are your thoughts on how to navigate these murky waters in this time?
So I am actually a first generation American. I was not raised in the American culture. I was raised in a household of immigrants. And so I have a different perspective of like the political system here. I think that in the US, that much more so than in other countries, there is this sense of like identity politics being really, really important. And it's come to the point now where we are so polarized by our different opinions and so individualized that, and this may sound literally insane, but feel free to Google because it is free. It has divided people so much that there is no need for any governmental division. Like in some countries, you have dictatorships or authoritarian governments that divide people, right, into groups. And here, the strategy is let's divide people based on their identities, based on their race, based on their gender, based on their political views. We have a bipartisan system here, which quite literally begs for you to pick a side. So in America, it seems like the general state of society is that pick a side has been the primary tagline since the founding of this country. And so it's very interesting because people will quite literally, fight with each other and lose friendships over essentially like differing opinions, right? Everybody's entitled to their free speech and their opinion, but until it doesn't comply with somebody else's opinion. So when it comes to like, showcasing your influence in social activist issues or political issues, my first question is it relevant to you? Like, is it something that you're actually passionate about and that you actually care about? If you don't, people can smell that shit from miles away. Just like you can smell the stench from the Abercrombie store. It's the same story here. You can smell it from a mile away, and then you're going to get attacked because it felt forced. Don't want that. That's cancellation in the making, and we all know how fast that happens. So to avoid any like crisis management or, situations for you or your team, then I would first say, what are some issues that you align with? And the other question is this the first time you're talking about it? Because if it's the first time you're talking about it and you're supposedly really passionate about it, that also raises some red flags. I have a client who is a social activist. He's a young father. He, believes very much in women's rights and reproductive rights. He has a daughter, and also his partner identifies as a woman. And so he actually made headlines during the post-Roe situation for getting a vasectomy as a very young man. He's 23. And that was a choice that he made because he lives in a state where, those situations are questionable, and he would rather just get the vasectomy, say, my partner and I didn't want to have any more children, instead of potentially endangering his partner with a lack of like essentially reproductive rights and women's rights in the state that he's living. And so that was something he was already passionate about. Like, people who maybe were following him from day one already know. Yeah. So it was not weird for him to suddenly speak out about that and suddenly get a vasectomy. It didn't feel performative because people were like, yeah, this is your brand. Like, I get it. Yeah. Whereas, we saw with Black Lives Matter, probably for the first time, both brands and people were like, oh, everybody's jumping onto this conversation. I feel pressured. I will too. Not saying that they didn't believe that Black lives didn't matter. It was just a conversation that maybe they didn't have before, or they didn't have behind the scenes, and they just decided to hop on a trend, and it looked and felt incredibly forced and performative, and then they got attacked for it and just went into this whole damage situation.
Yeah.
So I think it's incredibly important to, like, if you're going
to be authentic with the causes that you align yourself with,
exactly.
and also using it as an opportunity to be vulnerable and educate yourself. I remember during Black Lives Matters, like, lots of the creators were like, wow, I'm actually really educating myself now, and I'm happy that I have been pulled in to force myself to read some books or learn a little bit more. So sometimes it is a learning opportunity as well. Like they say, with a lot of power, a lot of influence comes a lot of responsibility. And part of that is educating yourself and being open about that, not pretending to be an expert. Like, I love when people are just authentic, like, oh, I didn't really know about this, but now I am. And like, thanks for bringing it to the table so I can learn. Like, having an open posture of learning, not trying to pretend like you knew, but being like, oh, wow, like, holy shit, the stuff in this country is crazy. Like, thanks for sharing, being open in that process as well.
And also be incredibly aware of how other people that you are associating with, because that is also part of your personal brand, how they deal with these issues. If, you were pictured with somebody at an event who decided to use a social cause as a cash grab opportunity, that is something you need to take note of. A really powerful personal brand that uses this kind of like social causes to essentially like divide his audience and create a more essentially revenue within his business is Kanye. Kanye is a very well-known public figure for using racial identity politics to essentially like sway people into supporting him when it otherwise is kind of insane. Like, it's very clear this man is going through psychosis, which is like, I completely respect his struggle with bipolar disorder, but there have been instances in the past where he will either, you know, terrorize Kim and kind of like threaten her on the internet. And then when people get riled up about it, he starts using race as a means to rally people towards something or against something. And it creates this division, but also, funnily enough, there's always a launch after it. There's always something that's being
strategic,
or
right?
sold. And so then it generates a ton of revenue. We saw that with his STEM player in February. We're seeing it now with the struggle with like Adidas and Gap and his drop of the Yeezy shades. And so it's very interesting. I think being incredibly aware of how other people are navigating this, and then deciding like, who do you want to associate with? Who do you think is doing a really great job when they're supporting causes?
Yes. Like, who do you look up to? Who you're like, oh, I like how she's doing it. She's doing it in a nice way. Like, you know, taking from that versus like, oh, this smells ick, you know?
Exactly. And having those conversations behind the scenes with influencers that you do respect, and being like, okay, well, you know, how did you go about this? And having that same, those behind the scenes conversations, I think, are more important when it comes to these issues than the front facing conversations. The front facing conversations
the action that comes from
after,
it, right?
It's the front facing, you know, like, I support this cause conversation should happen after you've had the behind the scenes conversations, or like you said, show up in a way where you understand and communicate that, like, I don't know everything about this, but I'm here to learn. Please, as my community, educate me on XYZ.
Yeah, I think it all comes back down, and this is a nice way to wrap up, is to the first thing that you mentioned, which is deciding your values, deciding your mission, deciding your impact. And this can be something in your own brainstorm sessions or in your own planning of your own personal brand, is think about, how do I want to react to these sort of things? Like, our company, you know, has always stayed away from partisan politics because we feel like it is divisive, and we're not, whether or not the founders of our company or what we do behind the scenes is what we do behind the scenes. But that doesn't mean we're not supporting causes. It's like having those conversations within the team of, how are we going to navigate? I think that's something you have to know while you're building, like while you're in the laying out the groundwork of who you want to be as a brand, right? Because like you mentioned very briefly, that cancel culture, you know, that especially when you're building and you're putting yourself out there, is something that we haven't really seen before. And I think it'll be interesting 5 years from now or 10 years from now to see personal brands, what they were 5 years from now, what they are now, with like how navigating. We're all learning. Social is still very new. I feel like the growth of social is faster than maybe even our spiritual growth, not to be like all, you know, get into that, but like, we're still learning here how to deal with these things. But social media is growing so fast, so there's like a big gap. So we're like toddlers, like we don't know how to act, or hey, this is the right way to react, or how to be authentic to myself, or helpful or valuable. So I think we're all learning, and as long as we have an open posture to learning and being held accountable as your own personal brand, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, and just understanding that influence is not about you. You were the tool, you were the face of your company as an influencer, but it is about other people. Those other people are going to be buying your book. They're the ones that are going to be watching your show. They're the ones listening to your podcast. They're the ones that are liking your videos. It's not you. So considering those people and finding a way for your mission and purpose and values to help them enrich their own lives, that's the goal. That's the difference between the 1% of successful influencers and the 99% that are employing the very narcissistic me model. So consider,
I love that, focusing on impact and not me. But
yeah, exactly. That's and nobody, that's why it's hard. You know, everybody wants to be an influencer, and there's a reason why it's very difficult. It's because influence is an art. It's not really, to a certain extent, something you can learn. You can learn the business aspects of things, but you have to already be influential in your real life community so that that can translate online and you can help more people and impact more lives.
I love that. Well, Kate, thank you so much. Let our audience know how they can find you, how they can work with you. I'll include all links in the show notes, but if you want to just let people know where to find you. Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, one question to wrap up. What's your favorite social? I always like to know, like if you
I love TikTok so much. I have had to do my own introspective thinking because I realize I have a personal brand also, and sometimes I'll comment things under people's videos and it'll just be, I have the tendency of comments going viral, so it's a problem. But I love TikTok. It's a great platform. It has connected me to you. It has connected me to so many other people, and you know, being able to build a community, it's unlike anything we've ever seen on social media. So I'm a big TikTok stan for sure.
Okay, so now how can people find you? How can people connect with you? Let us know the best ways.
Yeah, so you can always find me talking about personal branding and celebrity brands. So I get the negative comments too, because everybody loves or hates celebrities. But you can find me on TikTok at Kate MOB. I have all of my links in there, so you can book a personal branding session with me. You can join my community. You can get my time, my heart, my soul to help you tell your own story and help you have control over your narrative instead of just handing it over later to an agent or a publicist or a manager. You have that story established, and you know
exactly the groundwork, baby, the groundwork, like all
exactly. Yeah, no, it's really funny because my clients call this therapy, and I'm a Virgo, so that is the most on-brand thing that I've ever been told. But yeah, you can find me on TikTok. Feel free to comment. Feel free to like give me a follow, and
yes, let's do it. Kate MOB on TikTok, and then all the links to work with her will be in her link in bio. So that's how you can dig in and get a little bit more information for those that want to book a session or join your community, or all the other ways they can work with you. Thanks so much, Kate. This has been really awesome, and we will be in touch and talk soon. I'll be on your podcast next. So
yes, and thank you so much for having me, Nina. This was so fun.